You ever watch your father get hauled off his own land in an ambulance, just because someone who moved in a few years back decided she liked the look of your family's lake? No, I don't recommend it. But if you stick with me, you're going to see what happens when folks with too much power and not nearly enough history try to rewrite the past, and how a little patience, a stack of old papers, and a stubborn streak can turn the tide. It started the way these things always do, quiet, almost gentle. The phone rang just before midnight, the kind of call that sinks straight through your gut. My mother's voice, usually tough as pine knots, was nothing but air and panic. "Evan, it's your father. They took him in an ambulance. He collapsed. His heart." I remember standing in my kitchen, staring at the phone, and for a few seconds, the world just tilted. Turns out they was the HOA, or more specifically, Marilyn Stark, who decided being HOA president made her queen of Silver Trail Estates and, by extension, the shoreline my family's owned since the Eisenhower administration. She called 911 and told the dispatcher my dad was trespassing on his own land. The ambulance came, the sheriff came, Dad got hauled off, and Marilyn, I imagine, went back to her color-coded rule books with a sense of accomplishment. I drove straight from Billings that night, not caring about speed limits or the empty miles of Montana blacktop rolling out in front of my headlights. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was coming up over the ridge, and my stomach was a twisted mess of anger and something darker fear that maybe, this time, my old man wouldn't be coming home. The hospital was all bright lights and sharp angles. Mom was sitting hunched in a plastic chair, clutching a cup of bad coffee, her knuckles white. "He's stable," she said. "They're keeping him overnight." But it was the stress, Evan. It was them. They pushed him. He fell. He couldn't get up. The story spilled out in fragments. Raised voices by the water. Threats to call the police. My father refusing to leave the land he was born on. I didn't have to ask who started it. Stark and her security, two boys in matching windbreakers who liked to puff up and play deputy, had come down, looking for a fight. You ever notice how some people, given a little taste of authority, start acting like they invented the place? Marilyn wasn't from here. 8 years ago, she was probably fighting a different HOA somewhere back east. Now she decided the lake was her business. New signs, fresh posts in the Dirt Pine Ridge Lake, members only. Benches with the HOA logo burned right in, a brand on someone else's history. I stomped down to the shore after leaving the hospital, my boots sinking into the soft dirt. There was glossy new signs, unauthorized docks, a gravel path that sliced right through our property like a scar. The land itself looked confused old pine needles next to fresh construction, the kind of mismatched mess that tells you someone's pushing boundaries and counting on nobody noticing. But folks noticed. Tom Halper, 82 and still sharp, met me at the tree lean. He'd seen it all go in signs, docks, trash cans with the HOA crest. It's been coming for years, Evan. Little things. They test the line, see if anyone pushes back. Your grandfather, your daddy let folks fish, sure, but that was always courtesy. Never a right. He looked down at the churned-up soil and shook his head. Stark thinks she can take it because nobody else bothers fighting. That was the first real twist. It wasn't just a new sign or a single bad night. This had been brewing quietly for years, each improvement, one step farther, each HOA newsletter pretending the lake was community property. The kind of slow-burn land grab that only works when nobody's keeping score. But my family always kept score. I climbed up to the storage loft in the cabin, feeling every ache of anger and memory in my bones. My grandfather's papers were still there. Deeds from the 50s, faded survey maps, a yellowed letter addressed to the Pine Ridge Lake Association back in '87. His handwriting firm, deliberate. I permit neighbors to fish and access the lake under the understanding that such access is not a transfer of rights and may be revoked at any time. This is not a deed alteration. This is not an easement. Lake ownership remains solely with the family. That letter was dynamite, just waiting for the right spark. I spent the morning documenting everything: photos of the docks, the new benches, every single violation. By noon, I had a stack of evidence thick enough to make a lawyer's eyes light up, which is exactly what I did. Dana Whitmore, the sharpest land use attorney in the basin, read my grandfather's letter and just nodded. This is going to be a problem for them. Turns out, the problem went deeper than property lines. Dana started pulling records, digging through filings, whispering to anyone who'd ever sat on the board. That night, I met the former treasurer, Larson, behind the old mill rain coming down in heavy sheets, the world washed clean but for the mess we were about to uncover. Larson handed me a pile of papers. Stark's been cooking the books. Lake fees, assessments, donations all flowing into her husband's company. Round numbers, no receipts, no contracts. I tried to speak up once. Got kicked out for mismanagement. Be careful, Evan. Be careful. Everyone kept saying that. But once you start seeing the rot, you can't look away. Over $400,000 in lake access fees had disappeared over 15 years. A manufactured fiction, money laundered through shoreline preservation, projects that never happened, checks cut to Stark Property Solutions, LLC. Fraud. Plain and simple. So I went to the next HOA meeting. I didn't sneak. I walked straight to the front, dropped my folder on the table, and waited for public comment. Stark tried to cut me off. I read the deed. I read the letter. I held up Larson's copies and told the room exactly where their lake maintenance money had gone. Stark's face went pale. Residents erupted demands, accusations, folks realizing they'd been lied to for years. The fallout was fast. Dana filed for an injunction. The judge, Aldridge, wasn't the kind to mince words. She reviewed the deeds, the financials, the letter from 1987. This isn't a misunderstanding, Dana said. This is trespass, it's fraud, it's theft. Stark's lawyer tried to argue implied consent, community practice folklore over law. Didn't work. The judge ordered the HOA to cease all activity on our land, remove their structures within 30 days, and submit to a full forensic audit. And then, with one line, Mrs. Stark, you may wish to retain separate counsel. The whole thing cracked wide open. You'd think that'd be the end, but the story wasn't done with us yet. As we left the courthouse, a black sedan pulled up. Out stepped Samuel Rowan, governor's liaison for environmental policy. Turns out, my father's years as a state park ranger had meant more than he realized. Silver Trail Lake was subject to conservation protections under the Harold Callister Environmental Stewardship Act. The lake and the land around it were not only privately owned, they were protected under state law. The HOA had violated more than property rights. They'd violated state conservation statutes. The governor sent his respect. The attorney general was getting involved. I brought the news home. Dad was back from the hospital, stubborn as ever, but for the first time in weeks, he looked lighter. You didn't just protect our land, I told him. You preserved it for everyone who comes after. He smiled small, quiet, proud. By that evening, the audit had dropped. Over 10 years of fabricated shoreline improvements, signatures forged, checks written to Stark's husband's company. Law enforcement showed up at the HOA office. Richard Stark was arrested. Marilyn resigned, vanished, dissolved the board. Neighbors came by, old paperwork in hand, angry, relieved, grateful. The whole basin seemed to breathe out, like a storm finally passing. I walked Dad down to the lake. The dock was half dismantled, the benches gone, the ridiculous members-only signs yanked up and tossed in a county dump truck. All that was left was the water, smooth and quiet, sun catching on ripples just the way it always had. Dad sat on his old rock, touched the lake with his fingertips, and said, "Feels like it's ours again." I told him the truth. It always was. We sat until the sun dipped behind the pines. The world growing calm, the fight finally done. Justice doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it moves like water, slow, steady, inevitable. But when it arrives, you feel it in your bones. So let me ask you, where's the line between right and wrong in your world? If someone tried to take what your family built, would you fight back or walk away? Drop your stories below, even the messy ones. Let's talk about justice, honesty, and what it really means to stand your ground when it matters. And if you want to hear more tales where grit and truth outlast the lies, hit that subscribe. Because the fight's never really over, not as long as there's land to defend and stories to set right.